Progress.
I'd like to convene the Single Family Design Board meeting for March 27th, 2023. We will take a roll call, please.
Thank you. I'll proceed with roll call. Chair Kalas,
Here.
Board Member Grafiti,
Here.
Board Member Anderson.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go on to the general business portion of our meeting. The first item up is public comment, and this is an opportunity for anybody from the public who has something that they would like to address the board with that is associated with what we do but is not specific to an agenda item on today's agenda for them to speak. So do we have anybody who has requested to speak?
Thank you, Chair Kalas. I'll go ahead and start with in-person public comment. Just as a reminder, if anyone wishes to speak in person, please fill out a speaker slip by the back door for general public comment. At this time, I haven't received any speaker slips. And seeing no one in the audience wishing to speak, I'll move to virtual public comment. And at this time, we don't have anyone joining on Zoom, so I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Kalas.
Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from our board for February 27th of this year. So if staff can just run us through these minutes quickly, please, and just summarize them for us.
All you have to do is you have to say that address and then what the decision is. Oh, so okay. Project design, or just promotion.
Thank you for your patience. I'm a little new to this. For the first item for 229 San Clemente Street, should I read the scope of work as well? No. Okay, thank you. The motion was project design approval and continue indefinitely to consent with findings with the following comments. Should I read through those as well? Or?
Chair Kalas, generally we don't read through every single comment, but if we can keep moving, Mr. Herricks, and then if there are questions, we can always go back.
All right, thank you. Item 2 was 3208 Laurel Canyon Road. And the motion was project design approval and continue indefinitely to consent with findings with the following comments. And only 2 items for those last minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies. We have a third item, 1414 Santa Rosa Avenue. And the motion for that item was continue to the staff hearing officer for return to the full board with the following comments.
And then can we just see the comments for the last item?
Sure.
Las Positas Road, please. It's further down on your page, unless that was continued at that. It's other way to scroll, please.
It's item 4, there you go.
Oh, for item 4? Yeah, item 4 was continue indefinitely to full board for a conceptual review with the following comments.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any comments about the agenda or items of correction?
No?
Okay, would anybody like to make a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Right, Chair Kalas,
Yes.
Board Member Graffiti,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay.
And now if we can move on to the consent minutes for ratification. We have them for March 6th and March 13th. For March 6th, we had a few items, 1244 Shoreline Drive. And it was continued indefinitely to the full board with some of the following comments.
Right, that's the one we'll be seeing today, I think, correct? Okay.
The second item was 84 La Vista Grande, and it was approval of review after final with following conditions and comments. And it was only those 2 items for the March 6th consent hearing. And we're moving on to March 13th now, unless there was any questions or comments.
Do we need to go ahead and make a motion for approval on that item?
Yeah.
I will make a motion because I was in attendance that day. Do we have somebody to make a second, please?
I'll second.
All right, Chair Kalas,
Yes?
Board Member Graffiti,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, thank you. And then moving on to March 13th consent minutes. We have for 1620 Eucalyptus Hill Road with the following findings for project design approval and the final approval with the following comments. The second item B, 648 Surf View Drive, had the following project design approval and final approval with the following condition and comments as well. And it was only those 2 items for that.
And again, I was present for that, so I will make a motion for approval. If we can have a second, please.
I second.
Thank you.
All right, Chair Kalas,
Yes.
Board Member Graffiti,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to item D of general business, which is announcements, requests by applicants for continuous withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals. Is there anything from staff?
Yes, Chair Kalas, thank you so much. Ellen Kokenda, the Design Review Supervisor. I just want to name a couple of people here. We've got kind of a deep staff today, so we've got some people in training. Holly Garson, our SFDB liaison, is on vacation today, so we have Sebastian Herricks here, who is the staffer for SFDB Consent. He is in his official role now, taking over the consent calendar. We have Ted Hamilton-Rolla, who is also kind of shadowing, who will be able to be a support person at times. So he's going to be learning this new process. And then I just want to introduce Mariah Johnson, who is our new SFDB secretary. So she's going to be our new staffer. So she's training with Mary Ternaskaya. So lots of new faces and happy to be here. I do have a couple of announcements. One is that as you all know, the city is actively seeking to fill the 2 vacancies on the Single Family Design Board. Applications are up, and they are due by 5 o'clock on April 3rd. City Council has made it as convenient as possible to have interviews on the April 11th hearing, that Tuesday, and then also being able to do appointments same day. So it's interview appointments, so you really figure it out right away. And we've got a lot of people working to try to find interested persons to submit. So just wanted to follow up on that. Also, we will need to have a new vice chair. So at here, and just after we get through all of our announcements, I'd like to ask if we could have a motion for vice chair, and we can kind of go through that. And then we do have just a full list of appeals. So 229 Vista Del Mar went to council on March 7th, and that was your decision, the SFDB decision was upheld. So council denied the appeal and upheld your decision. We have 2 upcoming appeals, one on April 11th for 1269 Farello Road, and one for April 18th at 101 Santa Cruz. Those are both going to City Council. And then we do have an appeal coming in May for Laurel Canyon. And I can't remember the exact address, but I can get you that information.
That was the item we just ratified.
Yes, that should have been for the last full board meeting. And just a huge appreciation with kind of a smaller group of SFDB, and we should try to have someone in place by mid-April. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. Last, but I'm trying to think if there's anything else. We do have an ADU training slated for April 24th as well. And we did have something on the calendar for a discussion for SFDB, but we're still waiting to get some comments, and we might wait till we get our new members before we have that discussion. And I just want to get your thoughts on that.
I think that's the right thing to do.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I
Perfect.
think we wait till we onboard the other members and then have
Great.
a broader group
Okay,
to train. Yeah,
perfect.
I think that's great. I had one question. Were those the only items that you had from staff?
Actually, no. Okay. I think you had, was there one? No, I think I already said it. I'm sorry, I took away your glory. Okay, I'm a talker, so sorry.
Okay.
I stole it.
I did watch the appeal for 229 Vista Del Mar on the city council agenda, and I reviewed the staff report, and I just had a general question for clarity's sake. When there is a dissenting voice during a vote on our board, we are asked, or whoever is the dissenting voice is asked to state their rationale for the dissent. And yet I'm seeing in the meeting minutes that the rationale is not memorialized. And so when those meeting minutes get attached to a staff report and sent to City Council, without City Council reviewing tape, there is no transparency for them into the rationale behind the dissenting voices. And I'm wondering why we're not capturing that in our meeting minutes.
That should be captured as part of the procedure and as part of your ratification. If you don't see that in there and we've missed it, you need to call that out. I would just ask if we've missed that. But that is very much should be, that's why we ask for you all to comment on it, is because we want it in the record of what the rationale was for the dissent. So thank you. And if we've missed something, we'll make sure to look through that. And I see Ms. Johnson and Ms. Turnowskaya will can also keep us in check.
Okay, so I think that would apply to one of the items that we just ratified. So if we can just all collectively, both as a board and staff, work to make sure that those are at least in the draft meeting minutes going forward, that would be appreciated.
Thank you.
Is there anything else from anybody in the public or on the board as part of the general announcements? No. Okay.
Yeah, no, and we don't have any subcommittee reports to report. So I
Okay.
think we're ready to move on to the first item.
Okay, great. So we'll skip over item E. But if
Actually-
anybody knows of anybody who feels passionate about neighborhood design and would like to be a member of our board, public at large, or if you have experience in design, landscape architecture, interior design, structural engineering, or any of the other myriad of disciplines that relates to what we do, We're here. We would love for you to apply and be a part of our board.
So,
Please talk to staff.
yeah,
Yes.
Chair Kloss, if I can just, through you to members of the public attending, there's multiple vacancies opening, and it's you can have professional qualifications, which is very expansive, which requires, there's no City of Santa Barbara residency requirement. You have to live in Santa Barbara County, but not the city. And then to be a public at large, you do have to be a city resident. So that's the only real caveat, but City Council are the decision makers in this, and there's a lot of room for kind of sculpting the board as they wish. So yes, we're looking for good applicants, and you can always write your name down or information, hand it to staff, and we can get you the information for how to apply. And if I may, before we go on to item 1, if we could we need a new vice chair, if we could
Thank you
just.
for a reminder. General business. Okay. So we need to appoint a new vice chair. Would anybody like to, what's the word I'm looking for? Would anybody like to make
nominate?
To
If
nominate.
anyone
Thank you,
like
that's
to
the word.
nominate a vice chair.
Yes. Would anybody like to nominate a vice chair?
I nominate Board Member Anderson, if you would like.
I will second that nomination.
If there's no, I think we can do an official roll call, but it's not going to be a motion, but if everyone accepts, then that can be the case. I just want to make it known for the record, and if you could just do
I'll
the
proceed
roll
with
call.
roll call. So Chair Kalas,
Are you willing to accept the nomination?
Well, you'll have to train me.
We will do that. We will do that.
Okay. So that's a yes from me.
okay, Board Member Garfighty,
Yes.
and Board Member Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay.
Congratulations. Okay, so we will move on from general business to item 1, which is 1244 Shoreline Drive. This is a continued item at a concept level review. And I will ask our vice chair to read into record the project description, please.
Okay, we have a proposal for 290 square foot ground floor addition, kind of all around. 240 square foot second floor addition, though I think that is inaccurate. It's 320-ish on the second floor, just in our description. And 174 square foot garage addition associated with an existing 1,116 square foot single-story, single-unit residence with 245 square foot non-conforming garage. Project includes new doors, windows, exterior siding, roofing, replacement of existing fireplace and chimney, relocation of existing driveway, new trellis, new swimming pool with associated hardscape, fire pit, new fencing, and a minor expansion to the existing roof deck above the garage. Project requires approval from, I always say show, staff hearing officer for a front setback modification to allow the new garage to encroach into the front setback 7 feet, and a coastal development permit to allow the proposed ADU in the appealable jurisdiction of the coastal zone. The proposed total 2,233 square feet on a 5,845 square foot lot is 84%, it's a magic number, of the maximum required for the lot area ratio. So come on up, yes, no?
And if I may, once you invite the applicant up, I have a few comments to make.
Okay. Yeah, please, if you're here to present the project, please step up. And then just as a quick background, this was originally calendared on consent a couple weeks ago. You've been very patient, and I appreciate that in terms of getting you back here, because we did have a couple canceled meetings. And so just for the board's edification and staff's, this was in front of us at consent calendar for review, and I referred this to the full board. And the reason that I've done this is because we are having a larger, broader conversation about design triggers and what our board would or would not want to see. And so I thought this was an important poster child for that conversation. And I will ask for staff's direction in terms of what our current purview is and what we will be making decisions based upon. But there's sort of a broader topic here in my mind that I just want the board to be aware of. So we have narrow direction in terms of what we're reviewing for you today, and I understand that as well as the board. But I would like us to allow some opportunity for broader discussion just for staff's benefit, okay? So Ellen, if you want to
Yeah,
provide us
so
that.
I just want to clarify, this project does have an assigned case planner. Ms. Broadison is here, but this is a project that requires a coastal development permit, as is stated in the project description, also requesting a front setback modification. This is just a concept review. There's no appealable action that you will be taking at this meeting. But what you need to comment on when you get to your comments is the aesthetic appropriateness of the modification request, because you're ultimately giving feedback to the staff hearing officer about the design. This board's purview is design and aesthetics. It's not the land use decision. That really falls with the staff hearing officer for that front setback modification, but it's kind of a communication. So your comments are a communication to the staff hearing officer for that. So I just want to kind of help you understand what your purview is with that. And if Ms. Broadison wants to add anything else.
Good afternoon, Chair Collas and board members. Kelly Broadison, and I'm assigned to the coastal development for the project. So this project would have been exempt from design review. Not all projects trigger design review. So if they weren't doing a second-story accessory dwelling unit, the project would be exempt from design review, period. But, and then also, some accessory dwelling units can still be approved by, administratively by staff if they're not exceeding the height of the existing structure, or I think it's 17 feet in height. So this ADU, the second-story ADU, is really the only thing that's under the board's purview today. And then, as Ms. Collas said, she felt that it needed to be forwarded to full board. So it's a fairly small second-story accessory dwelling unit that's under your purview today. And I'm here for any questions if you need.
Thank you very much. So
Just one last comment. So you will be getting an ADU training on April 24th, and this will all be much easier to understand afterwards.
Thank you, very much appreciated. So we are strictly looking, for purposes of our review today, we're strictly looking at the second floor ADU and giving positive, negative, neutral comments for them to go forward to their modification hearing. And so for those of you in the general public, and just as a point of general education for everybody in the room, oftentimes when applicants have to go to a higher level of discretionary review, they will come to our board first to get aesthetic comments as to whether the project is considered to be viable or desirable aesthetically, so that they can take those positive comments to the higher body of review. And that's what these applicants are here for today. With that, I will let you go ahead and make your presentation, and we'll go from there.
Great, thank you. I'm Eric Baer, architect, AB Design Studio. With me is Will Rivera with AB Design Studio, and
Justin Manuel with Arcadia Studio, landscape architect.
good afternoon, board members. So, get my bearings on this software again. Okay, so as the project description listed, existing single-family dwelling. I'll zoom in on several photos here that show the existing home. You can see in this photograph, there is an existing second-story roof deck above the existing non-conforming garage. I'd call that out, just given that's relevant to the scope, the proposed second-story ADU is right behind this existing roof deck, so it's sort of it fronts up to the back side of the existing roof deck. Existing site plan, you can see the existing non-conforming garage here in white. So the proposed accessory dwelling unit is back behind that, which we'll see in the floor plans. One of Chair Colossus' comments last time was if we studied proposing that accessory dwelling unit above the garage. That was something we looked at. The negatives in our mind to that was that it brought that two-story volume forward towards the street, whereas if we can keep it set back towards the center of the structure, then you get some step back before that second-story height.
Sorry.
So, proposed second floor plan. Come on. So the existing roof deck is in the lighter gray tone. We're proposing just a minor addition to that roof deck, which is here in the slightly darker gray tone, and that's just to square off the area in front of the proposed ADU. The ADU is a modest studio layout, 320 square feet, as Board Member Anderson clarified. So very modest in size. And again, we've stepped that back from the building. It's 30 feet, the front of the ADU is 30 feet back from the front of the garage and about 10 feet back from the front of the residence below. It's set back from the east setback line considerably, as you can see here. Here's our setback line. So we've stepped it in from there as well. The existing roof deck's just important to note because this permitted roof deck has been in existence for quite some time. So that use-wise, there's already sort of a second-story element up there. The neighbor to the east is very accustomed to having neighbors up a level up there, and so we're not adding a new sort of element in terms of this second story that wasn't already there in some capacity. In elevation, that eastern elevation is perhaps most notable, which we can see here. So the proposed ADU, as I mentioned, is stepped back from the property line considerably further than the existing garage and that eastern edge of the existing roof deck. Chair Colossus, you had some questions on this window when we were last in front of you. The sill height is higher. The sill height's at 5 feet for this window. It's a modest window, 2 feet 6 wide, 4 feet tall, and again, a tall sill height. We can see the Shoreline Drive facing elevation here. We've kept the plate heights at a modest 8 feet. We've oriented the gable roof such that the roof slopes towards Shoreline Drive so that the plate height is low on the end that's facing Public Way. We're matching the slope of the roof with that of the main residence. And then lastly, material-wise, the proposed ADU is proposing a vertical natural wood siding, as you can see in this photograph here, very light in color. We're proposing Arcadia custom doors and windows that have the steel look, as you can see in a photograph similar here, and then the standing seam metal roof in a charcoal gray, as you can see in this upper photograph. I believe that's all I wanted to present today, so I'll turn it back to the board for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So at this time, we will, before questions, we will open the project up to public comment from anybody from the public that may want to speak to this particular item. So I'll ask staff if we've had any public speaker slips turned in or anybody online that would like to speak to the project.
All right, at this time, I haven't received any public speaker slips. If you wish to speak, we have public speaker slips by the back door that you can fill out. See no one moving to speak, I'll move on to Zoom. Right now, I don't have anyone raising their hand on Zoom, so I'll go ahead and move to written correspondence. We did have one that was submitted from Shruti Remaker, and with that, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Mariah. Okay, so we'll open up the floor to questions from the board. Ms. Graffiti, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions?
I do, a few. So this is to Ellen and team. One, I mean, when we add a second floor on, and we change all the materials and windows and doors on a residence, as an architect, I look at a holistic picture of that. So probably some of my comments are maybe not in our preview if we're just supposed to focus on the ADU, but I'm looking at an entire, like, is this project compatible with the neighborhood?
So I'm gonna try to direct this because it's a little bit tough, because we're doing one thing, which is looking at your project as it stands against current guidelines, and then you're starting to touch on why this is here in front of us instead of being reviewed at consent, which is this broader topic. So I'm going to recommend that we just narrowly look at this, make a motion, and then I know it's a little bit different than typical point of order, but then I'd like to be able to have a couple minutes of just conversation about the project that is outside of the motion making.
We have to be a little careful about that, because if it's, I think if we want to comment on the project, otherwise I'm just cautious of having a discussion item about something that hasn't been agendized. So that's my consideration for how this might work. So I think if maybe if you get into the conversation a little bit more about, if it's materials or kind of a direction to staff to look into something, or, that we might be able to hold a discussion on something like that being a request.
Rather than bifurcating it, okay,
Yeah,
so.
because I think we need to have it as an agendized conversation, if I understand correctly, but.
Okay, so why don't you just continue then, Ms. Anderson? I've been corrected, thank you.
Well, I will ask my questions. But I don't, I'm just looking at it holistically. So have you had neighbor communication with the sides and the back neighbor with the second story? I think it's more the rear neighbor that would be affected by the second story ADU.
The owners have had discussions with neighbors. I'm not sure to which ones. They're in the audience today if we'd like to ask them directly, if that's allowed.
No, they've had their opportunity to speak if they wanted to speak.
Okay, well, you talked about the neighbor to the east, and they have the patio, and so that would probably be the biggest concern, I guess, for the roof deck that exists and permitted. You answer that question. But I would think potential views from that back neighbor might be
I know they
affected
have met
with
with the neighbor behind.
Yeah,
Of course, they've expressed some concerns with the views. The property to the east is more directly impacting their views, and it's a two-story residence, so this is of lesser concern, given it's modest in its second story.
right, okay. The existing garage, I think, was a side entry versus the predominant, front double-wide garage. So is there reasoning behind, A, the encroachment, and B, having the double-wide garage door on the front of your property, which isn't quite as ideal?
There is, yes. So if I go to the existing demo site plan, you can see here the driveway was to the western side of the property with side entrance. It's a single-car garage, existing non-conforming. There was an objective to create a two-car garage. And looking at that, really this area that was driveway is their front lawn. It's off of their main living space, which of course along Shoreline Drive, there's a lot of desire to be orienting spaces out towards the ocean. So functionally, as well as just in order to practically get that two-car garage to work, we looked at relocating the driveway to the eastern side of the property so that they could have a front approach that would allow them to have some sort of front yard and patio space that isn't looking out directly onto driveway. And then that allowed to have a two-car garage. And in order to get that two-car garage to work without pushing back into their existing kitchen, it needed to come forward. And so it was sort of the logical solution.
Gotcha. And you're using all the existing walls and probably just taking roof framing off over the second floor area.
Yeah, this
So
is-
that makes sense.
This existing wall here is the back of the garage with their kitchen behind, which is largely to remain intact.
Right, yes. And the ADUs over the, lesser ceiling makes sense. Okay, thank you for that. There's that existing tree that kind of camouflages that roof deck, and you're removing that tree. Is there reasoning behind, is that removing that tree, number 5?
Yes, it was in order to locate the new garage addition, so that unfortunately pushes into the tree, but we've got Arcadia here that can speak towards the proposed landscaping.
Yeah, I do have the,
I do.
we're proposing a tree in the same location. It's going to be smaller. It's, the existing tree, they've been topping it for, it's been topped for a long time to keep views. This tree won't go up and block the views of the neighbor as well. So it's not going to be as big, but we're also proposing 2 more in the front yard. 2 more, those are olives on the, in the front actual yard, west of the, so we think we're mitigating, by proposing these 3 trees and taking out the 1. And we don't have enough space in that little area to really have something as sizable as the Brazilian pepper that's taken out, so factored into the decision as well.
So last question is just the material of the railing on that roof deck, since it's going to be more exposed now.
Yeah, the
If
idea is to keep that similar to what's there today. There's a horizontal wood railing, and the idea is to keep something similar there, and then match that with the low proposed fence that is along the front yard. But it's of note that that railing's not proposed to come out any further. It's proposed to remain located in its existing place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Anderson.
Do you have any, I'll call it, aerial photographs that would illustrate the fabric of the immediate neighborhood and where development exists relative to the front setback line, at least for the 2 flanking properties?
I believe we do.
Yeah, even the screened one on the right might, yeah.
Sorry, these controls. So here's our residence and that existing garage. You can see the neighbor to the east. Oh boy, sorry.
Apologies about our setup here. It's not the most efficient.
Okay. So it appears as though, based on what I'm seeing, it appears as though the westerly neighbor's garage may also encroach. Does that appear to be accurate?
That's our understanding, yes.
Okay. As well as maybe a patio or some sort of hardscape on the easterly property?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, if we could see the exterior elevations again, please. Is the roof pitch staying the same on the home?
It is, yes. It's a hipped roof currently, so we're maintaining the slope of the roof that slopes towards Shoreline Drive, but converting that into a gable and then matching that roof slope above.
Right, so you'll have a gable end on the east and the west.
Correct. You can see that here in
Property
the west
lines.
elevation best.
Okay. So, the reason that I referred this to the board is because I was very surprised when I was told that our purview is only over the second floor, because with all of the changes that are described here, and that you read into the record, Ms. Anderson, we are going to have a house that looks completely different when it's done than it does now. And part of our general purview as a board is to review projects and their context. And most specifically, what I was having, and whether they're in keeping with the neighborhood, both in terms of size, bulk, and scale, but there's also comments in direction or guidelines about style. And, it's saying in these neighborhoods that have distinctive architectural styles, structures and additions should present a harmonious character with them. And I think there's some elements that you're proposing that do, and then there are certain that I think deviate. And so I just, as a broader topic of conversation related to this project, I have concerns that there's no design trigger here where somebody can come in and completely change the nature of a house in a neighborhood to the point where it could be discordant with the neighborhood if it were not reviewed by our board. And that is why I referred you here, so that the board can understand what's happening in a broader context, and so that we could open up this dialogue with staff in terms of design guidelines that they're working on right now, objective design standards, all sorts of other things that are going on in the background. Those are the only questions I had for you. I guess I will open it up to comments from the board at this time.
I have comments. I would second everything you said, and I would even think that Shoreline would have a higher level of design scrutiny. But comments-wise, I think it's a great project. And it definitely will enhance and improve the neighborhood. It doesn't overcrowd the lot. It's got a lot of variation to the step back and what's going on. And thank goodness it's not white and black. Because you're going for a modern farmhouse somewhat with Santa Barbara stone, and yeah, it's nice to see a different neutral color palette. And the heights, I mean, the massing are keeping with some of the single, the smaller lots. And then we've got the two-story next to it. So I think generally it's a great project.
Yeah, I guess I'll first thank you, Chair Kloss, for sharing that I understand where you're coming from with those remarks. I also agree. I think it's a huge improvement to the current site. I appreciate the way that you're proportioning the second story element towards the back. I don't have any concerns. I think the size, mass scale is all appropriate. I'm very familiar with the Mesa and this particular part of the Mesa. I think for me, because there's such eclectic design in this neighborhood, around two houses around the corner. The house is in completely stone masonry, and then the one in front of it is like very modern. I almost feel like this house is a blend of some of those elements. But I think overall it's a beautiful design and would be in support. I know we're not voting for that, but.
I can support the front yard setback modification from an aesthetic standpoint, because I don't think that it is distracting from or discordant with the underlying fabric of the neighborhood. And I think it does help to promote the step-back nature from shoreline and support the idea of the ADU being towards the back of the residence, which I think are desirable aesthetically. I like the weathered wood look. I think it works well in the Mesa neighborhood because it harkens back to the old beach shack qualities of stuff that used to be there when I was a kid. And before everybody started popping the top on them and turning them into multi-million-dollar residences. I'll just say it, I'm personally I feel like farmhouse is pretty much come and gone, and yet people are still doing it, and that's completely up to them if they want to do it. I would encourage you in terms of detailing to try to take this in more of a beach cottage direction than a modern farmhouse that belongs in the Midwest, because this is overlooking the Pacific Ocean, not a prairie. Those are my comments. Would anybody like to make a motion? Or I guess.
And yeah, yes, if I may. So this would need to be continued to the staff hearing officer with comments, and then it would return. It's up to the motion maker whether they would like it to come to full board or go back to consent. Again, your decision will be for the second story ADU element. But I will remind this group that the staff hearing officer is looking at the entire site. That's the coastal development permit and the modification. The modification is a specific thing, but the coastal development permit is the entire site. So there is purview over that from a land use decision, but from a design decision, you'll be having them come back for that second story ADU element. So it's up to the motion maker whether they wish for full board or consent.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that this gets continued to the staff hearing officer with positive comments as it relates to the front yard modification request. And that as a board, we can support that because it supports a more pedestrian-friendly first-story volume along shoreline. It creates a stepped-back massing condition that softens the ADU project from shoreline. And it allows the existing deck to remain in play while the increased development on the parcel is pursued. And I would ask that the project be sent back to consent if or when you receive approval from staff hearing officer. And we do not need a roll call on that, is that correct? Because it's not a formal motion?
It's a motion, it's just not an appealable action.
Okay,
So yes, we should have a roll call,
so we'll
please.
ask for roll call, please.
All right, Chair Kalas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Garfitti,
Yes.
motion passes.
And do we have a second, actually?
you for
Did
your
I get a second?
patience.
Oh, wait, I'm so sorry. Can we just make
need
sure
to
that
do
we
that
did this
again.
appropriately? I think we're moving too fast.
Okay,
Can
I
we just
made a
get
motion. We need a second, please.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, and then we'll retake roll call, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kokinda.
All right, Chair Kalas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Gafidi,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience to allow us to daylight that. Yeah. Okay. So at this time, we'll ask the applicants for item 23855 Callecita, Little Street, to come and introduce themselves and their project, please. This is a project located 3855 Callecita. Designer is Roland Fournier of Fournier Design Studio, applicant John Mullen. And there's a proposal to construct a new 2,376 square foot two-story residence with a 432 square foot garage on a 10,000 square foot vacant parcel with an existing creek and drainage area. The project requests front setback and interior setback modification approvals from the staff hearing officer, also known as the show. The proposed total of 2,808 square feet of development on the 10,000 square foot lot amounts to 75% of the required floor-to-lot area ratio. No final appealable decision will take place at this hearing. Neighborhood preservation findings will be required when the project is reviewed for PDA. So I'm assuming that we're just making comments, again, that will go to staff hearing officer.
That's correct. And again, the aesthetic, you're commenting on the aesthetic appropriateness of the request for the front setback modification and interior setback modification. Kathleen Kennedy is the assigned case planner for this. She is not here. She's also on vacation today. But again, I can try to answer any questions that you might have. Maybe not details about the case, but at least kind of conceptually, procedurally, how this will work. But there will be no appealable action taken. This is really just for your comments only.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll ask the applicants to introduce themselves and their project, please.
Good afternoon, I'm John Mullen, and if we could go to sheet 3.
Turn your mic on, pressing the little button.
Sure. I'm John Mullen, and I'm agent for the Missionary Church of Santa Barbara, who owns this 10,000 square foot property. The applicant is proposing to build a single-family, two-story home consisting of approximately 2,465 square feet. This home will serve as a parsonage for Hope Church. The senior pastor of Hope is Jim Firth and his wife Jenny, and they're here. They've served this church and community over the past 21 years, and during this time, they've rented their home, so their hope here is to have their own permanent residence. As I mentioned, this is a 10,000 square foot parcel. It's currently undeveloped. It's zone RS 7.5 with an average slope of 17%. And it's bounded on the north by Callecita, the east by a single-family residential neighborhood. And to the south and to the west, it's vacant land. So this is important because it's contiguous land, 3 acres, that the church also owns to the south and to the west of this property. There's a water course that's bisecting the property, and this minor water course doesn't appear on any 100-year flood maps. We've worked with the city over the last year in situating a home on this property. It's been challenging because of the constraints. The project has been designed to minimize grading, to reduce impacts to adjacent riparian woodland vegetation, and reduce encroachment into the 25-foot top-of-bank setback from the water course. In situating this home, we've minimized removal of native trees and are proposing to remove only one specimen oak tree. To assist in our biological analysis, we hired Watershed Environmental, a city-approved biologist, to prepare a biological assessment of the water course. And I won't go into all their details, but they basically have come up with mitigation for the removal of that one tree, as well as the city's come back in their first completeness letter stating the restoration of the entire property, including removal of native vegetation and planting of riparian shrubland. So in a moment, you'll hear from our landscape architect. She'll just talk to you about that restoration. As I said, we're proposing to build a two-story structure consisting of 2,465 square feet, and our FAR is 75%, which is below your 85% standard. And we really believe this home is compatible with the existing neighborhood. There are one-story and two-story homes in the neighborhood, and there's homes of similar square footage in the neighborhood. And this comes under the Tier 3 storm management criteria. And so we are designing into this a bioretention basin so that there's no stormwater running off of the site. I'd like to just hand it over to our architect and have him just explain to you the characteristics of the building. This is Roland Fournier, and then after Roland, Martha DeGasis from Arcadia Studios will briefly touch on our planning scheme.
Thank you.
It's in the middle. There you go. Green
Hi
and
there,
sky.
Roland Fournier, Fournier Design Studio. Yes, this particular site has a lot of interesting factors to it. The main one being the grade of the site, which is a little different than most sites where it's diagonal across the site down into the creek. So it presents a multi-layered sort of approach of getting any sort of house size to fit within that vernacular of the site slope. So we've asked for a small modification on the front setback of 5 feet which we've incorporated a porch. And also on the interior side setback, we've asked for a slight modification as well in order to pull the house away from the creek a little bit more to keep the majority of the house out of the creek setback. With that, the house design actually will sort of terrace down the grade and following the grade to that creek line. We have a permeable deck in the rear and a more inviting walkway to the front in stone that Martha will discuss a little bit more, but no permanent fence around the front or anything like that. But for compatibility in the neighborhood, we've looked at some homes that have some two-story elements and one-story elements. So we've tried to keep our design to a minimal in the amount of second floor that we have. So in these areas here, we have a one-story edge. This is down toward the creek, and then at the front of the home, also two one-story edges. Elevationally, you can see with the existing grade lines, we've kept the house profile down within those grade lines at the 30-foot point, and also being considerate of trying to make the home as efficient as possible, having some area of solar panels kind of tucked in underneath that. We'd like to do more, but there's a minimal amount that we can get within the proper areas for those. So when you look at the front elevation, the house, as you can see, kind of clicks down following the existing grade. And we have a little bit of grade build up in the front to create some lift for the porch element. And then at the rear, the house also tapers down toward the creek on the side, and then also at the rear. And on the rear, it's kind of hard to tell, but this side here shows the deck and this wall plane basically 15 feet back from this plane. So it terraces back at an angle this way and from the roof line down. So it sort of just crumples down and fits within that roof height and the creek setback. I think that's it for me. Martha?
Yeah, can you drive that for me?
So Martha DeGasis from Arcadia Studio. So there was mention at the corner of the house, we will need to remove a coast live oak. And the mitigation for that is 5 24-inch box coast live oaks. So you can see one at the corner on the southwest and that kind of brighter green. And then the others around the creek area. So we're conforming to that mitigation standard. We do have a little detention area or bioretention area that's at the corner of the porch. We have a native sedge being planted in there. And the balance of the plant material are all native plants. The ceanothus and coffeeberry, monkey flower, sages and things like that. So the more refined material, of course, along the Cayucita frontage for the native material, and then a little more rambling, rougher, broader spreading native material along the creek restoration. So we are fully restoring all the area up in the Esha Creek setback area. And then I'll just note that there are a few other coast live oaks existing on the site and a little native arroyo willow. So those are being protected. And another plant that we are removing are group of plants. And you could have seen it maybe on the earlier slides that were shown. It looks like a very large tree, but it's not. It's just a cluster of kind of sapling size olive trees that have kind of profligated in that area. So those are being removed along with all the other non-native vegetation, and we're replacing that with native trees and shrubs. The front walkway, we're proposing a flagstone, like a Fossil Creek flagstone. And then the front driveway is concrete, colored concrete, and the back deck would be a Trex or Azek type material in a soft brown color. So all the materials tie together in color, along with the house color, which is a little brighter. It's a sort of white and
Off-white, yeah.
off-white and British racing green. So we've got those more earth colors for the ground plane elements. And I think that concludes my comments.
Is there anything else you wanted to add? Or would you like to retain your time in case you have anything to add later?
Yeah, nothing else to add at this point.
Okay, great, thank you. So at this time, we will open the project up to public comment from anybody who's present or online that would like to speak to the comment and to the project. And if staff could acknowledge, we have received a couple things on this as well, I believe.
Thank you, Chair Kalas. So I'll go ahead and start with in-person public comment. At this time, I haven't received any speaker slips, but just as a reminder, if anyone wishes to speak in person, please fill out a speaker slip by the back door. Seeing none, I'll move on to virtual public comment. So at this time, we don't have any hands raised on Zoom, so I'll move to written correspondence. And we did receive a couple of letters from Lee Marin and Mary Dawson. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Kalas.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to open up the item to questions from the board. Ms. Garfeiti, do you have any questions?
It's hard to read here. Do you have the top of the second story ridge height? Like, what is the actual height from the grade?
From the grade that it's under, the peak is at 273.4 is the grade height at 30 feet, and the height of the roof is at 273.1 feet.
Okay.
That's at the very point, right there. And you need to look at it in two places. It's there and here.
Yep.
Because again, it's diagonal, so
Yep.
it's hard to.
That's it for me.
Do you want to go ahead or you want me to start?
Yeah, I can go.
Okay.
back on that page, I'll just start there. Can you go over the plate heights and your finished floor dimension in between? And whether you were taking your dimension from natural or your finished grade?
Yeah, the finished floor height is 247.5, and the top of the highest point of the roof is 25'8" above that. We have 9'1" plate on the bottom floor and a 9'1" plate on the top floor with approximately 12 to 14 inches of floor section.
Is the front porch one included in the FAR? I guess that's probably for planning. And two, is that the only thing that is encroaching in that front setback?
There's actually a foot of the home is also encroaching in that setback.
Okay.
So it's
The
4 feet of
porch
floor
and a
plus
foot
1
of
foot
the home?
Of lower floor home, yeah.
Lower floor home?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I could just mention that our initial application, the garage was actually up at 15 feet, and there was a comment from the Transportation Department requesting that we move it further back. So we adjusted it in our second submittal.
Yeah, that always is another question too, and the garage is a little more ideal design-wise in the city's opinion to not be a predominant feature and/or step back. But due to your site constraints, I can understand potentially why. Yeah, I mean, there's really no other options. Unless you can come up with some that, why, yeah, the garage is a predominant feature there on your front elevation. Let's see. Can you go over your materials and potentially talk about your design style?
Sure. Design style, I would categorize it as a very traditional house design. It's not heavy craftsman. It's not the farmhouse. It's just sort of a traditional design, similar to, in coloring anyway, to like the Father of the Bride house in that movie. So we're trying to be very traditional. So we're basically some off-whites in the stucco, or I'm sorry, there's no stucco on the project, in the siding and with some gable detailing and a composition roof in a blackish gray tone.
Can you show me that sheet? Can you scroll down to here? Because I think you have.
Yeah, it's on there.
We just like to go through things and see it again.
There we go. Oh. Okay.
Oh, there. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. And then we haven't gone too far into it yet with the client, but we want to have some sort of traditional bell type lighting for the house.
Okay, so, but it's horizontal, not, or horizontal, you have board and bat
Yeah,
siding
there's
called out.
horizontal siding and some elements of board and bat, typically in the gables, with some outlookers.
Okay, gotcha. That's right. Thank you. Yeah, and you highlighted the second floor over the first floor. I think I got that. That was one of my other questions. And do you have we typically like to see the adjacent neighbor footprints. So when I looked at the site, there's the field of the church, and I'm assuming
Yeah.
that's planned to remain a field potentially. So it's really just the adjacent neighbor
Yeah.
to the east.
I can go to I have a
That
little bit of a
would have any
vicinity map up
effect?
here. Right in here. Really, this is the only neighbor that's here, and which is his house here, and the house is like on the west side of the site, so, because we have all of this foliage and creek buffer, and I think have a dimension on how far away the house is from that setback on the site, on the plan here. Let me just verify that.
Sheet 5,
Yeah.
or sheet 3, sorry.
Yeah, the house is approximately 57 feet from the property line, and I believe there's another 15 feet to his rear, or to his rear of his house.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the good news or the bad news is I grew up on this street for a large portion of my life.
We consider that good news.
So I'm very familiar with this neighborhood from back in the day. But I did go and drive by today because the neighborhood has changed a little bit, and I, out of, an interest of being objective in terms of looking at things, I wanted to remind myself of sort of what the underlying fabric of the neighborhood was. So one of the things that popped out to me as I was driving along Callecita and down Rolling Brook, which I thought was, the most proximate cul-de-sac, as opposed to the next one up, which is, I think, something Springs, and I'm not forgetting the name of it. But one of the things that jumped out, contrary to what we like to see in the city of Santa Barbara, is that in this neighborhood, most of the garages sit forward of the residences, or in line with the residences, which is a little bit counterintuitive to what we typically like to see.
Yeah.
Which was a little bit reassuring to me, frankly, in terms of what you're proposing, because I was concerned about that from a neighborhood context. I also observed that the majority of the houses, both along Callecita, Rolling Brook, and the secondary cul-de-sac, are one-story in nature. And just from my recollection of the sizes of homes in the neighborhood, old school chums, friends, and things like that, it seems like the house that you're proposing is larger in square footage from most of the homes that I recall. So I'm inclined, I guess this is a question period, so I should be asking questions. I'm sorry, I'll stop. So one of the questions is how you arrived upon your exterior finishes and style, because the majority of the homes that I'm seeing in the neighborhood are typically a stucco or a plaster with some trim work. There's one or two that have the horizontal siding or wood siding, but the majority of them don't. So I'm wondering what drove you in that direction rather than sticking with, a plaster or a stucco finish that would be more in line with, what appears to be the majority of homes in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and, I understand that. If, I guess in the design of the home, because it is, relatively large, and there's larger wall expanses on this home than, let's say, in the neighborhood, because it is 2 stories and is a little larger in scale, I felt that the application of a material texture would be of good value and still have an aesthetic quality that would sort of uplift the I don't want to say typical genre of stucco, but I think it just adds a little elevated flavor of character and texture to those larger planes of wall that are incurred in a 2-story home.
Okay. So it sort of breaks down the massing in your mind.
In my opinion, yes.
Okay. And then what is the pitch of your roof? That was another thing I was looking at in terms of neighborhood context. It seems like a lot of these are kind of, I don't want to say mid-century. Some of them kind of have that flair, but really they're just kind of,
Yeah.
they're really just kind of subdivision quality residences. Yeah.
Yeah, the 50s, 60s
Yeah.
sub-housing. Yeah, 4 and 12 is the pitch
Okay.
on this house.
And what would you say the majority of pitches are in the neighborhood, just from your own observations?
I think the original homes are more in the 3 and 12 And some of the ones where you can see that they've gone on and done an addition, they've increased those pitches to maybe 4 or 5.
Okay.
Predominantly, though, I believe they're 3, 2 to 3.
Okay.
I didn't notice any rock roofs out there, but
I didn't either.
Yeah.
Most of them that I saw were, they were either a comp shingle or shake, or some of them even look like they might be old wood still, or,
wow.
yeah, low profile, but,
Yeah,
Okay.
most were very low profile.
on your site plan, this site plan that we're looking at, if you scroll, so the sheet comes down, but we look up, can you see the footprint of the home that is to the east?
Oh, yeah,
Is that memorialized on the
it's
survey?
right here is the back part of the garage of that unit, then I don't think it's on. Yeah, it's just cut off. Maybe the civil has it on there a little better on the photos. This thing's jumpy. Oh, no, it's not on there. The site photos may have it. I don't know if I can zoom in there. This portion here. Is that close to what you want to see?
Yeah, that's helpful. So perhaps this is a question for Ms. Degasis. In terms of the, I'll call it the creek cleanup work and maybe cleanup and mitigation work that is proposed, how much of the screening between the existing residence there, which I think is on the corner,
It is.
to the east, and the proposed residence on your parcel, do you imagine is going to be lost or removed as part of that work?
I think.
Maybe the landscape plan would help to look at too. I don't know.
Sure, but I think also scrolling up on the site plan, the architectural site plan, you can see, maybe we can go back to that sheet where you were just before, Roland, yeah. And then, yeah. So you can see there's a large dot in the gray area, the open yard area. That's that olive cluster, so we're to the left of that. So we're losing that group of scrub, if you will. And what I've done is reinforce that eastern edge with taller native material, toyons and things like that. So I think that we're going to mitigate some of that mass loss with the taller native plants. And then, once again, we have those 24-inch box oaks. I think we'll more than likely choose multi-trunked oaks. So initially, they'll probably be in the 8-foot area, something like that. So, yeah, we are losing that one cluster of olive plants there. So I think we're going to have a little bit of a see-through there, but once again, mitigated with the oak trees that we're adding.
Okay, and the oak trees, can you just generally point out where they're going? My understanding was they were more over in, as we're looking at the sheet, the upper right-hand corner of the parcel.
Yeah, so now we're going to probably want to scroll down to that colored landscape plan, shows that pretty clearly. Yeah, so there's one close to Cayucita, if you start at the left, and then clock up to about 12 o'clock, you can see another oak tree that would be in the line of sight of that neighbor to the east. So just moving right, thank you. And then the others more on the southern border there. One that would be on that south edge. And again, we're avoiding the existing native trees that are on site, so when we place those. And then one that would more or less shelter views of that deck from the east. And then the last one at the southwest corner of the property. So I think those are going to be a help. We have other various vegetation. We have some California red buds and so on. So I think it's a pretty generous array of native plants that are going to help soften that whole elevation.
Okay. Okay, those are the only questions I have for the applicant. A question for staff. So I know that the applicants have clarified that this is getting reviewed for creeks, riparian areas, things of that nature. Mr. Mullen, you specifically noted that this was not on the list of the 100-foot year or 100-year flood, I think, courses or
Yes,
creeks.
and we also had the Creeks Division out at the site with Kathleen Kennedy. And so we walked the site at that time. And so we'll be providing with our civil engineer some additional cross-sections. So there was a hydraulic analysis done by the civil engineer to determine flow line and setback. But I have to say, over the last year, the community development planning department has just been amazing in helping us to try to situate this home. And so, as you know, there's quite a few constraints, but the Creeks Division didn't seem to have an issue. It's not, I mean, I would not call this a creek, I'd call it a water course. I'm a licensed civil engineer. And so there is some flow in there, but it's pretty minor. So I don't think that becomes something that is critical. We also had a biological study that was done for this project that was submitted to the city. And that's where the mitigation measures came from. And he was very well aware of what, riparian and what was going on with the creek. And so what you've seen with what the city has recommended as well as what Martha has incorporated, I mean, I think we're hopefully addressing all of that.
Okay.
And Chair Kloss, if I may add, just for context for the board and any members of the public, that anytime an applicant submits a development project as part of, when it triggers discretionary review, such as a staff hearing officer decision or design review, that it triggers the California Environmental Quality Act. And so what that means is a lot of these reports, the bio report, the extra kind of work to look at the riparian habitat, the oak tree, any kind of tree removal has a lot of extra environmental scrutiny. And we, as part of our application completeness process, we request those, the reports and information from the applicant to submit those. We review them. We have to approve them. Our environmental analyst has to approve them. And then we're able, once we have all of that information, we review it, and then we can make a CEQA determination. So that's really what the information that they're providing is for. And so that's really all the background work that happens. And we can't schedule it for the land use approval until we deem the project complete and we have all of those, that information to report on.
Right, thank you for that. The reason I started touching on this topic is that about a year to a year and a half ago at this board, we saw a development that was occurring on Hope Avenue. And there were a lot of conversations surrounding stormwater management there. And when I went out to the site today, I observed the stormwater conductor, for lack of a better way of putting it, that exists below Calle C. Tahir, and it runs towards the proposed development and area for, I think it was 691 Hope Avenue, where there were serious concerns about a plugged culvert and some other things. There was a lot of neighborhood conversation going out about that. You happen to be at the outfall of all of that. And so I just want to make sure that everybody's keeping the broader context in mind, not in an effort to thwart your desires here, but just, for lack of a better way of putting it, everybody to understand what's upstream of you, right?
Right, and it's
Because there's a lot of money that's going to be spent on building this house, and if that
Thank
were,
you. I
if that
appreciate
were
that.
lost in the process.
And it's
it
my
would be a
understanding
bummer.
that project has been approved at this point. And again, they're tier, I'm sure they're tier 3, and they've had to maintain all drainage on site and retain it. And so they're not adding to the problem. But
To
I'm
the
aware of
from
that
downstream.
issue that was brought up at those hearings.
Okay, great. Okay, those were the only questions that I had. Ms. Graffiti, do you have any comments?
I guess in
And
looking
if I may guide, again, this project is requesting a front setback, and both a front setback and an interior setback modification. So as part of your comments, if you could weigh in on the aesthetic appropriateness of those two requests and kind of the siting of the project.
So, Ms. Graffiti, I will just also say, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, if we don't feel like we have enough information at this time to make those comments for the staff hearing officer, we can request additional information of the applicants and for them to return. That is an option.
Yeah. I personally don't think I need more information. I think I could be supportive. I think I would be supportive. I think it's a nice design. I think there are enough traditional elements to the home and a neutral palette. I would definitely encourage you to go as off-white as possible to keep it not, that bright white that would really contrast with the neighborhood. I also really appreciate the native plantings and the design. I think it will be beautiful and really go with what the creek and the design and just that area as well. And I think that the oak, we could talk about box size if it was important, or if we needed to talk about screening between that neighbor. But I think the location of the one is similar to where that oak grove is being removed. So that mitigates any, concerns for me there. And so, yeah, like I said, I think I would be supportive of a front setback and interior setback modification.
Ms. Anderson?
Struggling here. Yeah, I believe the project definitely will enhance the neighborhood. The colors, yes, definitely. It's got that woodland setting, so the natural softened whites, like Ms. Graffiti mentioned, yes, was one of my comments as well. I think the materials are appropriate for the neighborhood. And the design. The part I struggle with is the massing and the height of the two-story walls. And in my opinion, kind of maximizing that height with the neighborhood of a bunch of single-story suburban ranch residences, even though there are the 2 stories beyond. They're not full 2 stories. So I just feel like approaching the house too from the open field with that west side as a 19-foot wall that's not broken up. That's the part that I'm kind of struggling with right now. I know we're under the height limits. And there's no landscaping, I guess, but we have the field on that side. But, so being in support of the front and the interior setback encroachment, I'm not sure I could make that. My tendency is not on the interior. I'm kind of inconclusive on the front, but I just would like to see it reduced in scale and or stepped up, broken up, articulated more massing-wise.
May we comment? Okay.
The board is, it's the board's opportunity to comment at this time. So I can totally appreciate the site constraints you're dealing with here. I mean, I'm looking at this parcel and I'm going, wow, you got a 10,000 square foot parcel and you got about 3,500 square feet to work with. So I understand what's driving you into a two-story volume condition. I don't know that I, as a member of the board, have enough information to provide you with the supporting comments that you desire for the staff hearing officer with this information that we have in front of us. And so because your square footage is part of what's driving the second floor, in order to be able to understand and speak to the issue that Ms. Anderson was talking about, which is the massing and the height, I need to understand that square footage in context with the rest of the neighborhood better. So I would like to see an FAR study done of the 20 closest homes that are in the neighborhood. And I think we need to define the neighborhood as a board, because there are homes that come off of La Cumbra Road where there's a flag lot development that occurred back there probably about 20 years ago. And I don't want our direction, if we're going to give direction for this FAR study, I don't think it's appropriate that includes those, because they're not part of the driving or vehicular or typical pedestrian sequence to which you would arrive at this home from. So I think, in my mind, the neighborhood is Callecita, maybe Rolling Brook, maybe the other cul-de-sac that's immediately to the east. And I'm forgetting what the name of that cul-de-sac is.
Villa Roja.
That sounds right, yeah. So I think that would help me to feel better about being able to speak to the volume and the modification request before us. I agree with my compadres to either side of me here that are suggesting that the color palette does probably need to be neutral. I think, generally speaking, because you are asking for a second-story residence in a primarily single-story neighborhood, that a more neutral palette would help reduce the perceived mass and height of the home. I would like to see a reduction in plate heights. It's a new home. You have an opportunity for volume on the second floor if you frame it in a particular way, where I don't think you need a 9-foot volume up there in order to get some spaces that feel large and generous. So I think I would like to see an FAR study, and I would like to see a study of the same neighborhood described previously, if the board is in agreement that that's the neighborhood, in regards to 2 versus 1-story homes, just so that we know where those are. I think the roofing type is appropriate. I think the general location for the development is great. Part of me wonders if the deck could be moved closer or over the creek so that you could get some of the articulation that Ms. Anderson is looking for from the westerly side. I think that would be a kind thing to do for the neighborhood, because when you come from La Cumbra and you're driving down Callecita towards the east, it would be nice to see some movement on that facade rather than just a solid wall. Those are my comments. I don't know if anybody wants to make if you'd like to respond to anything, you're welcome to at this time, briefly, please.
Great, a couple items. One is, Roland, let's just respond to the westerly side, which I understand the concern about the massing on the westerly side, and it's something that we can take a look at.
Well, yeah, the massing on the westerly side, that's our one opportunity to, have enhanced living spaces, because it's the one site that's not at an angle, which is cut off on this side. So in that perspective, we've just created a very efficient use for that space that the client would like to have as living space. We can study some areas of, material deviation or something to enhance that side. Is it the side elevation, or is it the massing of the elevation that is the concern? This elevation here we're discussing.
For me, it's both. I mean, you're arriving from La Cumbre, and right now you have an open field there. And regardless of what's going to happen or not happen there in the future, that we can't take that into consideration. So we just are looking at what's in front of us today. And it's a very tall wall. There's no articulated push or pull to that. There's no movement to it. There's very little landscaping there to soften that edge. I think it's all of those things, and the height. I think it's all of those things in combination that I'm responding to.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. One other comment is on the deck, we did have the deck closer to the creek, and one of the concerns was encroachment into that setback. And so working with community development, we pulled out one of the decks to keep it outside of that creek, outside of the creek. So that's something that we can take a look at and work with them. Regarding the FAR study, I mean, we're happy to do that study. As you know, with the constraints of this site, we would, if we had a one-story building here, a residence, it would be about 1,100 square feet or less. And so we're sort of, the constraints sort of force us to some degree into the design that we do have. And so, we could perform the FAR. I know, there are many one-stories, but there's a two-story that's less than 300 feet away in that neighborhood. And so, whatever the board would desire, we can go ahead and do that study. But my concern is we're not going to somehow fit this into a one-story structure by doing an FAR analysis.
So, and that, to be clear, that's not my intent in asking you for that. If the square footage that you're proposing is in line with most of what is in the neighborhood, regardless of whether it's one or two stories, then as a board, we can support this project as being in context with the neighborhood. But if you're proposing something that is twice or 50% or 60% over what seems to be the norm in the neighborhood, and that is what's driving you to a second story as opposed to your site constraints, that creates a different situation for all of us.
Yeah.
And so that is why there is the need for that information.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
So we making a motion to continue back to full board with, now, how do we look at FAR study and agree of the neighborhood? Are we going to try to do that now, or just going to
Okay,
ask
so-
the applicant? Or,
So I think we need to define the neighborhood for the applicant. And then I think we can just fall back on our guideline, 20 closest residences within the neighborhood. So I've provided my opinion as to what I think is the neighborhood. But it would be nice if we had consensus among the board as to whether that defines the neighborhood or not in everybody's mind.
I mean, I'm in support of that. For me, I'm not needing the 20 closest homes report, so for the sake of just doing the exercise, I can agree with your description of it,
Of the neighborhood.
of the neighborhood.
Okay.
I think that if, this residence is centered around the 20 closest homes, that you're going to grab those couple of 2 stories that are to the east of the property, which
You might.
to me are in the context of your neighborhood. I mean, typically, we would ask for the 20, surrounding closest to try to capture.
In your motion?
Okay, so we will continue to full board with a FAR study of your 20 closest homes. And if you want to refer to compatibility guidelines, page 15C, for further detail on that FAR study. That's what we would like to see. And I don't know if that porch, Ellen, is included in that FAR calculation, the square footage. I mean, to me, building-wise, it would be.
So we have a Chair Kloss, through you to Vice Chair Anderson. We've got a definition of what is considered floor area, and it has to be, I think, it's all defined in the code, and it has to be enclosed, and so there's like 75% that has to be enclosed, and so there's a measurement, and we would verify that, and if it met the standard, then that would be included. There is an exception that carports are included in the FAR, which is confusing because carports can not be enclosed, so.
Yeah.
If I may, in this calculation, it was not. because
Okay,
the
right.
porch is
That's what I
not
would
in the
guess,
code.
and my best guess is that will not be included in
It's
the.
not the
as part of
75%,
that.
right, okay, but
But it's part of
building-
the mass, or the bulk and the mass of the building, so it's still under your purview, but the measurement is how we do that will be reviewed and verified by staff, and that will be kind of, the 84% is based on, I'm sorry, the 75% FAR is based on this particular number.
So for purposes of your motion, you can just direct for the FAR study to be completed, and staff will ensure that that's calced properly.
Okay. Yes. Okay, so yes, staff will verify that we're under the 75% and the porch is excluded from the FAR study. So when you come back to, we would like to recommend to see further studies on that west elevation of the massing, potentially, and Leslie, you're going to correct me, if you want something different than bringing that second floor plate height down from the 9 foot, and or breaking up that west elevation.
May I comment on the FAR? So an FAR study is going to require that we know square footage, slope, net area of lots, which we can probably determine that. But my concern is how accurate that is going to be from the standpoint of calculating square footage of these homes and the slopes of the properties.
Ms. Kokinda, can you speak to how staff might be able to support the applicant's needs in that area?
We can, yes. If I may, we can work offline after this meeting, and we have kind of a procedure for how to do the 20 closest lot study and different ways to look that up to make it a little bit easier for this ask.
Great, thank you.
Is there anything else you want to add to your motion?
That you would consider as well softening the white, the whites in your color palette. And I believe those were our 3 items.
Okay, so I'm going to second that, and I'm going to ask for staff to read us back just bullet points on the motion, since there's been quite a bit of conversation, please.
Yeah, I apologize if they're incorrect. I'll do my best.
That's
and
okay.
Just let me know.
That's why we're asking you to read it back to us,
So the
because
first one,
we're all in need of it. Yeah, that'd be great.
I have provide a FAR study of the 20 closest homes, and staff will verify that you're under the 75% and the porch is excluded from that study for point 1. Point 2, I would like to recommend to see further studies on that, and then I missed a portion. If you would want something different than bringing that second floor plate down to the 9 foot or breaking that up on the west elevation. So there is a portion that I missed on point 2 if you want to clarify that.
I believe it should state further studies on the west elevation to break up the massing of the 2-story building.
That is a directive. It's not a request by the board. So we would like to see studies brought back to us for our review.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, I will second the motion that is on the table. And if we can have a roll call, please.
All right. Chair Kalas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Gerfeidi.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And if I may, I'll work with Kathy, and she can get you the information about
When's
the
Kathy back?
tomorrow.
Oh, great. Okay.
I'm going to ask for a 5-minute recess so we can take a quick water break. Single Family Design Board meeting for today. We will move on to item 3, 3635 Santa Maria Lane. Applicant is Gina Ruby, and owners are Brad and Julie Hodges. This is a proposal to demolish the existing 1,191 square foot single-story, single-unit residence and construct a new 2,021 square foot single-story, single-unit residence and a new 430 square foot attached garage. An existing permitted 375 square foot accessory dwelling unit will remain. The proposed total of 2,826 square feet of development on a 9,524 square foot lot is 79% of the maximum required floor to lot area ratio. No final appealable decision may take place at this hearing. Neighborhood preservation findings will be required when the project is reviewed for project design approval. If we have applicants, you guys may speak, may step forward and introduce yourselves. And this is off and that is on, so they're a little bit deceiving. So if you would just introduce yourselves, and you have 15 minutes to introduce your project to us.
Okay. Gina Ruby, the applicant and the design team, and Mr. and Mrs. Hodges, the owners. Okay, let me just go through site plan. So you can see the existing residence. Right now, there's a carport, so that will be the new garage. ADU will remain. Survey. The existing. And then here's our floor plan. How do we zoom in here? So,
If you could speak into the microphone just a tick more,
Yeah.
please. Thank you.
so this is the new plan. We had the first set of plans that we sent in, and we have made some changes to the front based on the comments that we got. So the front elevation, there's no deck now off of the front bedroom. All the finishes that you see. And side elevations. Okay, and then we did include photos of the neighborhood. And then photos of the existing home. This is how we can zoom in here. Okay. So basically 1 story. Oops.
It jumps really fast.
Yeah.
That's the roof.
Yeah, modern design, going with kind of like a little softer gray with the stucco. The roof, we have the standing seam roof, just in the center where that pitch is. Okay, and then on the actual site, we're using mostly permeable finishes. This back here is mostly, as you can see, just a very steep slope, so nothing's really going to change there. And finished floor is the existing finished floor. So that doesn't change, it just basically we did the addition to the back and the sides. Yeah, and then the front will remain also, just new steps up. Driveway elevation is pretty much staying exactly the same as it is right now with the carport. And that is pretty much it.
Okay. Is there anything else that either of you want to add, or?
We're taking up a lot of existing
And
hardscape.
pardon my interruption, so for City TV, yes, do you mind putting on your microphone? Thank you. It's not for the room as much as it is for people tuning in.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you can just introduce yourself.
I'm Brad Hodges. I'm the owner
Thank you.
of the property. We're taking up a lot of the hardscape. It's flat work. It's flagstone, and replacing it with that permeable product, the Permaline. I forgot the name there, but that's a permeable paver product, in the hopes that we balance out the additional for the stormwater management, balancing out the additional roof line with replacing that with permeable pavers instead of concrete. The concrete driveway will all come up. A lot of concrete's coming up and being replaced with that paver, which was in reaction to the stormwater management stuff, which was new to us. That's about all I get. Now, one of the motivations for the flat and the modern design, it's what my wife really likes, but I really wanted solar, lots of solar, very high efficiency, affordable in the long term for the both of us. So I wanted solar, but I hate the look of solar up on pitched roofs. I just can't stand it. So we're going to do the solar on the flat part of the roof, and the roof tilts towards the back. It slopes towards the back, so hopefully there'll be nobody that can look down and look on those ugly solar panels. The house behind us is way up on a bluff, and there's a very large oak tree that blocks them, so they can't see down to us at all. And that's about it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, I'm Julie. I'm the other owner. I just want to point out that some of the photos, I hope it's not too deceiving in that some of the photos are like ultra modern, and that's because it's the closest that we could find to kind of resemble what we have in mind. Like the lower left, that narrow window. Ours is a lot smaller, so I just want to point those little things out. I don't know if that matters.
Okay, thank you. Okay, for the record, we'll just note that you have 8 minutes and 20 seconds left on the clock in case you want to respond to anything as we go forward.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so at this time, we will open this item up to public comment.
Thank you, Chair Kalas. I'll go ahead and start with in-person public comment. At this time, I haven't received any speaker slips, and seeing no one wishing to speak in the audience, I'll go ahead and move to Zoom. Right now, we don't have anyone raising their hand on Zoom, so we'll move on to written correspondence. We did receive a couple of letters from Judy Williams and Gordon Brewer, and with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Kalas.
Thank you. Okay, so taking a couple notes here. I'm sorry, sometimes my note-taking skills is not as quick as I would like for it to be. I wish I was like a court stenographer. Okay, so I'm going to open this up to questions from the board. Ms. Gurfeiti, do you have any questions?
I guess first is, did you engage with any of your neighbors?
Yes, we did. We actually went door to door. We knocked on 11 homes' doors, and 8 responded, and everyone gave their support. We showed them a drawing of the front, the north and south, the front elevations, and we explained to them the pitch roof. Just the pitch part is metal, and then this frame is modern, but our goal and objective is to still keep in complement of the neighborhood as far as it's hard to say the design of the neighborhood because it's an old neighborhood, but we also see a lot of homes that's pitch roof, so we want to kind of keep that too. But no one objected, you know, everyone just said they would be fine with it.
Okay, and then my second question, you kind of answered this already, but just what drove the style of the design?
Well, we want a newer home, you know, and we drove around the neighborhood and we did see at least one home with the metal roof, kind of modern looking, and we just wanted a nicer, newer home to live in, and that neighborhood has more of the older 50s, 60s look, which is fine. I grew up in those kind of homes, but we, you know, that's what we were thinking.
Also-
And also energy efficient too. We
Yeah.
wanna-
Julie grew up in actually Honolulu, and that style sort of is her comfort zone. But like I said, I kind of fell in with that style because to me, I wanted lots of solar, and I just didn't want to see it, so that kind of led that basic design.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions?
I just would like to look at the context photos again, if you could share those. And maybe kind of walk us through them if, yeah, that helps to zoom in.
Hold on.
Good. Let's start with the one on the bottom left. That's directly across the street.
Where's my little hand?
Bottom left. No, down. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's 17 homes on that
Stop.
street.
Okay, directly across the street is, they have a black
The right.
pitch, black shingle roof with black painted gutters and downspouts, and then a white, and then some cedar, which kind of, we sort of stayed with that in our, we have the black. Now that's more of a white, we chose dove gray. Now, the immediate neighbor to the left of that one, which I don't know where that picture is,
Lower
but
right.
just immediately to the left of that neighbor, I think it's, keep going.
Second row.
Down, it's down.
Yeah.
There, right there. Your cursor is on it.
This.
Yeah.
That's the immediate left. That's the exact same color we've chosen. That's a Sherwin-Williams dovetail. We've chosen La Habra stucco dove gray. And from my exploration on the internet, they're almost identical colors. And then again, that's also kind of black, new shingle roof, black downspouts. So we're not too, we're not too much contrast with the immediate neighborhood. And we plan to have our landscape, the drought tolerant, which is just like the street directly across. If you want to go back up into the left, you see the neighbor directly across from us. Just has gravel and drought tolerant plants. Our landscaping is going to mimic that as well. So at least to the house immediately across and to the one to the left, we're going to be a very similar look and look and feel. The rest of the houses are, a lot of them are, original 1952, architecture. There's some wood siding. And then there's some other houses that are, newer. That's a newer one. Keep going.
Those two
That
of
one
them,
was done about 5 years ago, we've been told.
the two-story one.
That's a two-story. That's a up.
That's
couple
further
doors
up the
to the right.
street.
Again, light color, dark roof. That one I think has, I can't tell, I don't remember if that was black shutters or dark green. But, we tried to stay close to those guys right there. That one for sure
Yeah.
is a real good match to us.
Color-wise, yeah.
Color-wise,
Okay,
yeah,
yes,
color-wise.
thank you. That's all I have for questions.
Can we see the floor plan again, please?
Let me try to zoom out here.
Maybe we could start with the site plan and then the floor plan.
Okay, so site.
Okay, so the dashed line is the line of the existing residence, and then the hard line that has sort of the hatch to the interior of it
Is the
is
new
illustrating the new
Correct.
footprint,
Yes.
right? Okay. Could you zoom out just a little bit, please?
I can try. Yeah.
I know, it's tricky. We all struggle with that. Okay. And then if we could see, actually more interested in seeing, I'd like to see I guess they would be the east and westerly elevations.
Okay.
Do you have the existing elevations of the existing home in these plans?
No, but I can provide those. We don't have existing
Picture.
elevations. I have existing,
The existing floor plan.
yeah, and then we have the photos. So I can show you the photos of the
That would be helpful, yeah. If
existing,
we
and then
could see
can
the
go back
side
to the new
photos, that would be great. And then
elevations.
we can look at, that's perfect.
Okay, so site, ooh. So existing front,
That's the that
that
that's
is just the
front.
That's the
corner
front,
of the
and then we go to
front,
the east
the other
elevation.
side.
It's a beautiful philodendron, by the way. I think that's a philodendron in the front.
I was
This
told
here.
the peach.
No, she's talking about that.
The big
bushy
bush.
thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
the big bush.
Okay, so there is the east side. So we face north, that is the east.
So is that maybe 2 bedrooms and a bathroom between them or something on the
Yes,
left? Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
And then we have the other side, which I think is just just like driveway view. So this is the existing
There's a
kitchen.
good shot of all the hardscape that's going to go
Yeah.
and be replaced with permeable pavers.
Okay. So the west, it looks like you've got maybe 2 windows on that side that sort of face the carport. A larger window towards the back and then maybe a smaller one like
Yeah.
within the depth of the carport.
Correct, yes.
Okay, and then if we could see the extra elevations, please.
Alright. Okay. So here we are, east and west.
Okay, and then just with your cursor, could you just, since on the west elevation, I can't see where the extent of the carport is, could you just roughly, with your cursor, say, oh, I think it starts back here and goes maybe
Yeah,
to
no, so the
roughly up here,
face
the new
of-
garage?
Yeah, so the face of the garage is about here.
The
And it-
existing carport or the new garage?
The new garage.
The new garage, yeah, is about a foot from that window over, and then lines up about right here.
Okay,
So 2 feet from the end of the house and about a foot from that window.
okay. And on the east elevation, could you generally speak to what the uses are for the windows that are basically on the right 2/3 of the residence? I'm not worried about the 2 clear story windows at the rear, but rather the other windows.
Sure, so this is the front bedroom window. And then we have these are the bathroom windows
For the guest bath.
for the guest bath. So I think it's shower, or no, this is toilet room and then the shower. And then we have a laundry room window here. And these are master bathroom windows.
Okay. And your plate height is?
8 feet.
That's not what I'm seeing. Your you're showing windows at 10-foot head height, so your plate height has to be taller
Yes,
than
oh
that.
no, plate height is, well, it starts 12 and a half in the front and then slopes down with the roof. So these windows on the side, so this is the front bedroom, so those kind of match the windows on the front. So you can see here, plate is at 12.6.
Okay. And your roof pitch is a shallow, like a 2 to 12 or a 1.5 to 12 or something?
Yeah. So the pitch in the center is at 6 and 12. And then we have this slope roof that will be like a 1/4 inch per foot.
Okay. Oh, so it's very shallow.
Yeah.
Okay. I think those are, and then, do you have a landscape plan?
We don't have a landscape plan yet.
Okay.
But it's gonna be mostly permeable. We're going towards decomposed granite, and because the city wants us to not have the water drain into the pipes and have it more, go into the ground. So that's what we're going for.
Okay.
Either
And mostly
decomposed granite or those pavers you saw. But I also just
drought
learned about
tolerant.
permeable concrete, which I didn't know until I read the stormwater management
Also
document.
permeable asphalt.
So that could be in the arsenal as well.
Okay.
We'll have
But like I
some
said, the front will
grass.
probably be like was across the street.
Yeah.
I
Simple,
don't-
stripped down,
strip
sort
the
of.
lawn, get rid of the lawn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just drought tolerant plants, typical, just.
Okay. It's early to be asking for a landscape plan, so I didn't mean to catch you off guard. I just was
Yeah, no,
wondering
that's fine.
if you had one. Okay, those are my only questions. Was there anything from staff that we need to know before we begin making comments, Mr. Hamilton?
This project is fairly simple in terms of the approvals it needs. Its single-family design board is the decision maker.
Okay.
So no show approvals, no land use approval on this one.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Graffitti?
Okay. A few comments. Appreciate you engaging with the neighbors. Appreciate the effort to make the design and the project sustainable. I think the palette would be appropriate. I think the size, bulk, and scale would be appropriate. I think the biggest thing I'm just struggling with is the overall style and the compatibility with the neighborhood. I mean, I appreciate as a homeowner and wanting, you have the style that you love, and then balancing that with how it fits in with the context of your immediate neighbors and then the general. The other thing I'm weighing, though, is also the style of the homes built, in the way they were built and when, and also, I know there are the two examples of the more recently redone homes that are kind of just different styles, but I think one is more kind of cottagey and it kind of has those traditional elements, then the other one's a little bit more, I don't know what you'd call it, some Spanish elements, but not really. So I think I don't want to confuse you, and I'll let the other board members, provide their comments, but I think that's the biggest one for me right now that I'm kind of working through is just the style of the home.
Ms. Anderson?
Yeah, I'm, single-story massing scale is all appropriate with the neighbors. To me, it was going more towards mid-century modern, and so colors and materials could soften that to, I'm a little progressive with styles in having people have what they want in regards to a neighborhood. As long as the style is consistent with its details and articulated well. I think that it can fit. I think the stark black and maybe softening the gray and, when you come back for PDA, that I'm sure you're going to take it a lot further in regards to style.
Absolutely.
I think it can fit. A single story. The front elevation windows, I think, to me, and I know that the mid-century modern, it's asymmetrical and it's different shapes and geometric patterns, but my tendency would be to look at that front elevation a little bit further. Not so as concerned as the sides, because they're not visible. And would definitely want to see landscape and the full storm waste management plans with your calculations and what you're proposing, because they can definitely support, and help.
Yeah, and we're in the process of creating that right now.
Yes, and yes, you had all the support of your neighbors, so thank you very much. That's great, super important. And it's always super helpful to see adjacent neighbor footprints on all sides, back, so that we have a better idea of how it, fits. And there's no views block. And I'm not sure, you didn't talk about the existing ADU, if you're planning on improving that in any way, since you're demolishing, right, the existing. So I'm hoping that you will consider tying architecturally the existing ADU into the architecture. So if you could bring that back, that would be super. I believe that's it for my comments.
Before I make comments, can I see the floor plan one more time, please?
Sure. Let's see if it'll fit. Okay.
Okay. It's always fascinating sitting on a board like this because you always think that you know where one of your or the other of your cohorts is going to land on a project, and then lo and behold, they surprise you. So it keeps it fun. It keeps it, it keeps it wild and crazy. Wow, I've lived in this town for 50 years, and I have never driven down the street. So it was kind of fun to drive down there today, and what a cool little neighborhood. It's quiet because it's a cul-de-sac. It's central to a lot of things. You're within walking distance to Farmer Boys. I'm really jealous. So as I drove through the neighborhood, there were a couple things I recognized. The houses are forward, the garages are typically set back, typically detached from the houses. That's what your ADU has been born of, which is a perfect thing to do with a detached, garage these days. I really like the fact that you have set the garage back from the front of the house to the degree that you have, in order to maintain that vocabulary within the neighborhood. I think that the degree to which you're increasing the width of the house is modest, and so it's still going to read as an appropriate overall width relative to the other houses that are in the neighborhood. I have concerns over the taller plate height. I don't have much of a concern over the FAR. I mean, you're a generally low FAR, and while the house may end up being larger than a lot of them in the neighborhood, which were smaller 1950s homes where people couldn't afford bigger houses,
Yes.
they built small homes. I live in one. I don't think it'll appear larger than most of the houses in the neighborhood from, you know,
From the front.
a footprint, because it's pushing towards the back, which I think is great. And I'm happy to see that you've kept it one story, because I do think that that fits contextually with the neighborhood better. I do have concerns over the modern style. And I do acknowledge that there were two houses in the neighborhood that have been remodeled. They're the two on the same side of the street as you. But they both have sloped roofs that I think allow them to speak more to the underlying fabric of the neighborhood. And this is definitely a deviation from that. So, you know, when I struggle with these things, I go, well, is this my hang-up or is this a guideline situation? So I go back to my favorite, page 28C of the guidelines. And I just feel like I should have this. Maybe I'll have it put on a T-shirt, you know? So it says, you know, in most cases, architectural style is not restricted to the existing neighborhood style, but it should be compatible with neighborhood and consistently designed in high quality for the entire exterior of the home. This is what Ms. Anderson was saying. Ms. Anderson's stance is, I'm okay with it being modern as long as the detailing is executed well. I respect that. I move on to the second paragraph, which is most neighborhoods possess examples of distinctive or similar architecture. In these neighborhoods, structures and additions should present a harmonious character with the particular surrounding neighborhood, avoiding a clashing or discordant appearance. Structure elements should be consistent with the best elements that distinguish the particular neighborhood where they are proposed. So this is a modern, blue-collar, sort of traditional, this is where maybe the engineer raised a couple of kids, or the plumber raised a couple of kids, or the guy that worked for the city raised a couple kids. They all lived in this neighborhood together, right? And so there's not a lot of distinctive bells and whistles on these homes. They're very simple. And I think that is the challenge, is to be restrained in the design here. I don't think that having a new home or having a home that feels modern, especially on the inside, I don't think that that's mutually exclusive from being able to fit better into the neighborhood context. I think there is a way to achieve that. I think there's a compromise that could be had, and that is what I would be looking for here. And that compromise would include a different approach to the roof lines, something that is more of a gable roof line that has more of a pitch that is similar to those of the existing residences in the neighborhood, and a similar material to those in the neighborhood. And the reason that I asked to look at the floor plan is whether I think that's even achievable with your concerns about where are we going to place solar, how can we do that successfully without seeing it from the street. My guess is that, I don't want to say your name right, Ms. Ruby? Yeah. I think Ms. Ruby could probably figure out a roofline solution that would allow you to have a home that still feels more contemporary, but that speaks to the fabric of the neighborhood and still solves your problem with the solar panels. So I don't have a problem with the square footage. I don't have a problem with the footprint. But I do have an issue with the deviation in the plate height and the roof lines as it relates to neighborhood context. And I think that needs to be studied significantly before I would be comfortable approving this and moving it on to another level.
Understood. And there are, so like you said, obviously, a lot of these homes are older in design. So I think the street behind Santa Maria and a couple blocks down. So the photos were trying to stay within like the 20 neighbors and all of that. So we can bring those and show that to you also.
And those may provide you, they may be informative in
Yeah.
terms of vocabulary and elements that you could use. There's plenty of modern or modern homes that have gabled roof lines and things of that nature that still are open and airy and feel modern and contemporary.
Are there any restrictions on the visibility of solar panels?
None that I'm aware of.
So we can put them up anywhere visible by,
We have no design control over that at all. It's a state energy mandate, and the state is encouraging that, and so other than the staff, as I understand it, and us needing to make allowance for placement or a certain square footage for those, we have then that's basically the state just telling us hands off in that area, right? You've
Because
got to allow for that much
the
space.
problem with our
It'll be a
lot with solar too is that the back has got a huge slope and a tree that kind of aprons over.
And that's your south-facing area.
That's south facing. So the only places that we could put them would be north facing, which is the street. So, but if we have to do that, we have to do that.
Yeah.
You may find that you can get some pretty good westerly exposure depending upon how your roof lines run. And you may have better opportunity there because you don't have as much impediment by your rear slope or the trees that you're speaking of. So, but that would be a study. So, you are here for comments today, and would anybody like to make a motion?
I can do my best. So I believe what I'm hearing from my fellow board members is that we would like you to bring your project back to full board with some further studies on neighborhood compatibility with your architectural style. And I don't know, I guess this is comments that I don't need to make. But in particular, if you could take a look at your roof lines and study maybe the more immediate neighbor and come up with some varied roof lines rather than just your center kind of clear story, that it would allow it to context better with your immediate neighborhood.
Yeah.
And the landscaping, if you can help soften, and the color palette and the materials in a wood, can help the success of that design as well. So I would urge you to bring that in as well, if you can, preliminarily, concept and storm. Yeah, and I know Leslie had mentioned as well the plate height in the front. If you could look at that closer, being that most of your adjacent neighbors, I'm sure, if it's sited pretty flat, are at that 8 foot. So you want to look at you're going to look at roof lines, so you're looking at plate heights as well. What else? I believe that's all I have for the motion.
Okay. I'll second that, and I'll just qualify it that by saying, so I'd like to just clarify for point of record, and this would be a modification, that the roof lines will be more commensurate with those in the immediate surrounding neighborhood in pitch, so that we'd be looking at something closer to a 3 and 12 pitch roof. That's the direction that I'm giving. Pardon me?
Sorry, there are plenty of mid-century moderns that pick up on that.
Okay, so that's my amendment to your motion. Do you accept that?
Yes.
Okay, and I will second the amendment.
All right, I'll proceed with roll call. Chair Kalas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Garfeidi.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. And I think that was an indefinite continuance, so you would work with staff in terms of when you resubmit.
Okay, all right, great.
Okay?
Thank you so
right?
much.
That was an indefinite continuance? I believe so. Okay. You can also request a 2-week continuance if you think you'd be ready that fast to come back
I
to
think that
us.
we could do that.
Yeah, that's your call.
Yeah.
Your
Okay,
deadline.
so we're gonna request a 2-week continuance rather than indefinite continuance, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
And
thank
Chair
you.
Kalas, if you could ask for a second on that, we just need to make sure that we're following protocol.
Okay, so you need to make that motion, that it's a 2-week, because you made the original motion.
Okay, and we're going to add to the motion that it's coming back in 2 weeks, the project?
And I'll second that.
All right, I'll take roll call. Chair Kalas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Garfeidi.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
And that was our last item.
Great. So with that, I'd like to conclude, and what's the word I'm looking for? That concludes the Single Family Design Board hearing for today, March 27th. Thank you.
Excellent.